The scans came back clear. No water, no heat, no movement. A dead rock, top to bottom. That's what VAULTERRA was on every readout we had. We almost didn't land. Then Vance caught it. A flutter on the seismic feed. Faint, regular, deep. Something under the crust was moving. Not shifting plates, not magma. Moving, like it had a rhythm. We came down anyway, on a plain of cracked gray stone, under a sky with no sun close enough to warm it, and we stood on a planet that every instrument called dead. This is what we found on VAULTERRA, and we're still trying to understand it. The surface was everything the scans promised. Dust, broken rock, a thin, bitter air that our suits had to scrub before we could breathe it. Nothing grew, nothing crawled, nothing had in a very long time. We walked for an hour and found no print, no bone, no trace that anything had ever lived up here at all. On any other world, that's where the report ends. Dead planet, nothing to see, move on. We'd written that report a dozen times before. Okafor said it best, standing there in the gray. This isn't a planet that never had life. This is a planet that lost it. She was right, and she was only half right, because the life hadn't died. It had gone down. We found the way in by accident, a crack in the stone, breathing warm air up into the cold. Not wind, breath. The planet was exhaling, slow and steady, through a wound in its own skin. We followed it down. The first 100 meters were just dark. Then the walls began to glow. It started as a smear of blue on the rock, so faint we thought our lights were playing tricks. Then green, then a vein of deep violet running through the stone like a buried river. The deeper we went, the brighter it got, until we were walking through a cavern lit in colors no surface world has ever worn. Blue, gold, red, a living violet, all of it coming out of the walls themselves. None of it was sunlight. None of it ever had been. Okafor had her hand against the rock, reading. "It's the minerals," she said, "and something living in them. The whole cave is feeding on the planet, on the rock, on the gas coming up from the core." She scraped a thin film off the wall, a slick, pale mat, the kind of thing you'd never look at twice. "This," she said, holding it up in the colored light, "this is the bottom of everything down here. Bacteria eating sulfur and stone. No sun in the equation at all." She turned to us, and her voice had changed. "There's no sun down here. There never was. And it doesn't matter. This whole world runs on chemistry, not light." We kept descending, and the air got worse. Vance was watching his readouts the whole way down. Hydrogen sulfide's climbing, oxygen's thin and getting thinner. Anything without a scrubber breathes this for 10 minutes, and it's done. And yet all around us, things were alive in it, thriving in the exact mix of poison that would have killed everything on the surface in a single breath. The gas that made VAULTERRA deadly to us was the same gas that fed it. That's the trade this world had made, somewhere back at the start. Give up the sun, give up the open air, and in exchange, never die when the lights go out, because there were no lights to lose. And here's the thing that stayed with us. Everything we'd ever seen alive, every tree, every animal, every blade of grass, runs on sunlight, one way or another. But it doesn't have to. On Earth, there's a cave in Romania, sealed off for 5.5 million years, pitch black, full of poison gas, and packed with life that has never once touched the sun. It eats sulfur, it eats the rock, It builds an entire food web out of the planet's own breath. VAULTERRA is that cave. The whole planet is that cave. And then the cavern opened up, and we stopped thinking about chemistry because there was a city in front of us. Not ruins, a city. Towers of carved stone wrapped around the glowing veins, terrace on terrace, falling away beneath us into a dark we couldn't see the bottom of. It went down further than our lights could follow, level after level, for as far as we could lean and look. And it was full. They moved between the lights, pale, long-limbed, eyeless. Where we have faces, they had a forest of fine feelers, reading the air, the stone, each other. They didn't look up when our lights hit them. They couldn't. A few hundred meters down, in a city older than our species, no one had eyes, because no one had ever needed them. Okafor was the first to understand what we were seeing. "They gave it up," she said quietly. "Sight, color, they evolved it away. Why grow eyes in a world that's always dark?" On Earth, the same thing happens. Cavefish, cave insects, sealed in long enough, lose their eyes and their color over generations. The body doesn't waste what it can't use. These people had been down here long enough to forget light was ever an option. For a while, they let us walk among them, and the city stopped being a wonder and became a place. A real place where people lived. We watched a worker fold food into the feelers of a smaller one. Those same pale mats scraped and pressed. And the small one held on the way young things hold on everywhere. We saw marks worn into a doorway at the height of a hand, a million passing touches in the same spot, the way a stair wears down on Earth when enough feet take it. We found a corner where someone had set out rows of glowing stones by size, by color, for no reason we could name. And Okafor stood looking at them for a long time. "That's not survival," she said. "Somebody arranged those because they were beautiful, in the dark, for an audience with no eyes." They weren't monsters, and they weren't gods. They were people in a world with a stone sky. And like every world, this one had things that hunted. It came while we were crossing a lower gallery, a stretch the city had left dark, no glowing veins, the stone gone black and silent. Vance felt it before we saw it. "Hold, nobody move." Something was in the dark with us, big, low, patient. It had no eyes either, but where the people read the world gently, this thing read it for prey, feeling for the tremor of a footstep through the rock. We stood frozen in our own lights while it passed close enough to hear it breathe, its long black body sliding over the stone, tasting the ground for us. Sato didn't move a muscle. None of us did. One footstep, Vance told us afterward, one tremor it didn't like, and it would have been on us before we heard it. It went on into the dark, hunting something else, and we breathed again only when the stone went still. The people had a name for it too. They did not say it loudly. Even down here, where they ruled, there were deeper, dark places they did not go. We learned the shape of their world by walking through it. Everything they built pointed one direction, down. The grand halls weren't at the top of the city. They were at the bottom, the deepest level we could reach, closest to the warm breath rising from the core. Vance ran the numbers and shook his head. For us, up is better. Up is the penthouse, the mountaintop, the throne. For them, it's flipped. Down is sacred. The closer to the core, the higher you've risen. It made sense once we saw who lived down there. The deep ones, larger, paler, slower, moving with the weight of things that are obeyed. The workers parted around them in the glow. This was a civilization built like a spine, standing straight up and down through the rock, and the holiest thing in it was the heat at the very bottom, the breath they called life. And that's where the mystery began, because for all the tunnels that led down, and there were thousands, not one of them led up. No stairs to the surface, no shafts to the sky. Nothing. A whole world had been built with no way out of it, and that doesn't happen by accident. Someone had closed the doors. We might never have found it, if not for one of them. The workers wouldn't come near us. The deep ones watched and said nothing. But one of them followed. Smaller than the rest, hanging at the edge of our lights, always just behind. Okafor noticed it first, the way it kept turning its feelers upward, toward the ceiling, toward us, toward a direction no one else would look. The others read the stone, she said. This one's listening to the sky. They had a word for it, we learned later, the way you learn a word for a thing that's forbidden. The upward one, a flaw, a heretic, someone born wrong who couldn't stop reaching for a story the rest of them had buried on purpose, that there was something above the rock, that the world had a top. Everyone knew it wasn't true. It was a child's story, a madness, and this one had spent its whole life trying to prove it. You have to understand what that costs in a place like this. Their whole world agreed on one thing. Down is real, up is a lie. Every law, every god, every wearing down of every doorway pointed the same way. To believe in the sky here wasn't curiosity, it was treason against reality itself. And still, it followed us. Because we had come from somewhere its own people said could not exist, and the moment it felt us, it knew the story was true. It had been right its whole life, alone, and we were the first proof it ever had. Okafor wouldn't stop watching it. "We didn't find this one," she said. "It found us. It's been waiting its whole life for something to come down from a place that isn't supposed to be there." It led us to the forbidden deep. It wasn't at the bottom of the city. It was off to the side, behind a wall of carved stone, sealed and marked and guarded the way you guard a grave. The deep ones were already there when we arrived. They knew. Somehow, they always knew. And for the first time, they spoke to us, not in words, in heat and pressure and the shiver of the stone. And Okafor's translator caught just enough. "Do not open the deep. The deep is closed." The deep was always closed. Reyes asked the only question that mattered. Closed to keep something in, or closed to keep something out? No one answered. Not them, not us. We stood there a long time, the four of us, in front of a door a civilization had died to keep shut. Vance wanted to leave it. Whatever they were scared of it for a reason. We don't open other people's graves on a hunch. Okafor wanted to read it first, map it, understand it before we touched anything. Reyes just kept looking at the deep ones, at the way they'd placed themselves between us and the seal, old and certain and afraid. "They're not guarding a tomb," she said slowly. "You don't guard a tomb for 1,000,000 years. You guard a door." and Sato was already at the seal. I want to be honest about what happened next, because we argue about it still. We had no right. It wasn't our grave, wasn't our God, wasn't our door to open. But the crack was already there. The same warm breath leaking through it that had pulled us down in the first place. Sato put a hand against it, and the old stone, weakened by 1,000,000 years, gave way. It wasn't a pit, it went up. A shaft, narrow and ancient, carved by hands and then sealed by them, rising up through the rock toward the dead surface we'd landed on. And at the very top, impossibly far, there was a pinprick of gray, faint, cold, ordinary daylight, the light of a sun too weak to warm a dead world, falling down a hole that had been closed for 5,000,000 years. None of us spoke. We'd crossed light years to get here, seen oceans that thought and beasts that hunted by heat, and somehow the thing that stopped us cold was a single shaft of weak gray daylight falling into a hole in the ground. Because we understood, all at once, what it meant to the people standing in it. To us, it was nothing. The dim light of a dying sun on a dead world. To them, it was the first proof in 5,000,000 years that their oldest law had been a lie. That the world had a top. That above the stone, there was a somewhere. It touched the floor of the forbidden deep, and every one of them went down, not in fear of us, in fear of it. The whole gathered crowd of them, workers, deep ones, the ones who are obeyed, dropped flat against the stone, feelers flattened, bodies shaking, because the thing their oldest law had warned them about, the thing their ancestors had walled away and erased from the world, was real, and it was touching them. The sky. A people that had given up their eyes, kneeling before the first light any of them had ever felt. And the upward one did not kneel. It stood in that thin gray beam, feelers wide open, drinking in the one thing it had been called mad for believing in. I don't know what that is in a creature with no eyes. But if any of us had ever looked that way at anything, I'd call it joy. We found the rest of the answer on the walls of the shaft on the way back down. Marks. Old ones. Carved deep by them or by something shaped like them long ago. Okafor ran her light across them slowly, and the more she read, the quieter she got. "It's a record," she said, "of why they closed it." We'd assumed it all along, that the ancestors had sealed the deep to hold their people in, a wall to keep them from wandering up and out into air that would kill them. We were wrong. The marks didn't tell a story about anyone trying to leave. They told a story about something arriving. Because once, a very long time ago, the door had been open, and something had come down it. From the surface, from the sky. The carvings didn't say what. Maybe they didn't have a shape for it, with no eyes to see it. But they had a shape for what it did, and that shape was repeated over and over all the way down. The city, and then the city emptied. Whatever came down that shaft had been bad enough that an entire civilization chose to wall off the heavens, guard the wall for 1,000,000 years, and teach every child born after that the sky did not exist. Not as a lie, but as a mercy. Better to grow up in a world with a stone roof and no fear than to grow up knowing there was a hole in it and something on the other side. We left VAULTERRA with the door open. We couldn't close it. We didn't know how. And I keep thinking about that pinprick of gray at the top of the shaft, and the thing that came down at once, and a whole world below that just learned, because of us, that the sky is real after all. We told ourselves we'd shown them the truth. Maybe we did. Or maybe we just unsealed the one door their ancestors died to keep shut, and the light we let in was never the thing they were afraid of. We left VAULTERRA behind, but it did not leave us. Somewhere ahead, another world is waiting, and the Aurelia is already moving toward it.